People who have broken up because of sexual incompatibility. What happened after the breakup? Story 1. He ended up in a very happy relationship with someone exactly like me to an uncanny degree, not in appearance, but in life experience, personality, and attitude, with whom he is sexually compatible, and I'm still single like 4 years later, and it kinda stings, not gonna lie. Story 2. Dated a guy once who was very into one specific kink, and he made every sexual encounter about satisfying it. It's not the kink itself that bugs me. It's the fact that there was never any variety in our sex lives. To use the old cliché, the sex became mechanical and routine, which made it boring for me, like performing a script every time. After the breakup, we both found new partners. I hope she and he are more sexually compatible than he and I were. I haven't kept in touch with them all that much though, so no idea. Story 3. My first middle school boyfriend was gay. When we started dating, I was tagging along to the gym with my dad every day. I had oddly defined biceps for a girl, a pixie haircut, and washboard flat chest. I was constantly being mistaken for a boy, and he would tell me he'd never met a girl as beautiful as me, that I was gorgeous. A year later, puberty had set in. Suddenly I had C-cups and hips. Men were stopping to look at me in stores. Suddenly, he was disgusted by me. Suddenly, he only smiled at me when other boys were looking, and seemed horrified at the idea of holding my hand. One day it clicked that he was excited to be seen in public as my boyfriend, because the other boys were impressed by that and wanted to talk to him because he was dating me. He didn't actually want to date me. Trying to date him was slowly killing the respect and fun that friendship was built on. I went to my mom for advice. I didn't have the words to ask, how do you tell someone you aren't willing to be their beard for the 6 years until graduation? But that was the gist of the conversation. She called me absolutely terrible for even thinking about asking that, and expressed disgust that I would ever think something like that about such a nice young man. He was similarly furious that I would break up with him and refuse to stay friends. He hadn't realized he was gay yet, but he was so angry that the guy he liked might not think he was cool if he got dumped. That was his big fear about the relationship ending, that he might lose attention from his crush. Happily, his crush seemed thrilled with the idea that they could hang out after school, play some basketball, and play some video games to comfort my ex until he was over me. He didn't come out for another decade, but he also didn't date another girl after me. Story 4. I broke up with him because he loudly discussed everything about me with anyone who would listen, including sex. Up to and including the fact that, in an era before it was normal to not have a bush, I had a very groomed area. One of his friends, who I had never met before, asked, "So did your pubes just never really grow in, or do you wax?" When there was lull in the conversation, this was especially galling because he had the worst premature ejaculation problem, and I would never have dreamt of telling anyone. Did he change after we split? No. I knew what his next GF sounded like when she came because he imitated her for me before I even met her, but apparently he found a new type of condoms. Thicker? Designed for anal, maybe? Which alleviated the 2-pump explosion problem, which he also told me. Man had no filter. Edit. I worked out later that he had no conversation or opinions of his own. The only thing he talked about to one person was what another person said or did. X thinks Y. A always says YPU should do B. I was with M, and he says people with square jaws should get this haircut. The problem was, he had no filter for he shouldn't broadcast it. My new GF has had her period for 10 days. She's seeing F the doc on Tuesday. Oh, couldn't make dinner on Friday because he had explosive diarrhea. He says his kids are always bringing stomach bugs back from creche. I no longer live in the same country as him, so I no longer know stuff about people I'd rather not know. Story 5. I knew a girl who broke up with her first BF of 5 years because she really wanted someone more dominant in bed, and he was apparently just about the most gentle lover you can imagine. Another guy came along and started teasing her about how he could tell what she was into, and she couldn't even imagine what he could do for her. So she broke up with the first BF and got with this guy. Shockingly enough, BF-2 made good on the promise, and they've been happily having mind-blowing sex, along with one baby for the last 4 years. Perhaps even more shockingly, When BF-1 found out why she broke up with him, she didn't tell him it was because she was bored in bed because she thought that would be cruel. He was furious. He confronted her and told her he was into rough, controlling sex too, but he held back with her because he didn't think she'd be into it. Basically told her he could have rocked her world if she had just asked. But by that point, she was engaged to BF-2, and it was too late. Story 6. She was gay though nobody knew. She was hiding it really well and trying to make her family happy. She went away to school and decided to live how she wanted. It hurt, but I'd be more hurt if she kept lying about wanting to be with me. A consolation prize, she bought me a Buzz Lightyear electric lollipop holder that spun the lollipop so I didn't have to. Massive time and energy saver. We talked it over on her next visit back to town, and there were no ill feelings. Story 7. I've had a few. Mostly one of us just lost interest, but I've remained friends with most. One of them just became a regular friend. I live 10,000 miles away from her, but I know I could ask her for just about anything in case of emergency. People are people. You can just agree that SHT didn't work out, but still be friends. Story 8. He tried to blackmail me to come back, but his family wouldn't let him, and they got me away from him, LOL. If anyone's wondering, we broke up because he kept asking for sex, but he was terrified that his thing would snap in any position. So it always ended with him having a tantrum that we couldn't do anything because of his own fear, and he would try to blame me for it. So yeah, LOL, it was an everyday argument situation with him. Story 9. Last ex was complete shit in bed. 1.5 together. Foreplay consisted of grinding or bumping his erection against me until I gave in, or rubbing me dry. Would take offense if I asked to use lube, as it was his job to get me wet, even though he often wasn't. Borderline never went down, and clearly wasn't into it when he did. Weirdest thing was, he wasn't really into anything except his own cum. Would tell me how full of cum he was, how much he wanted to cum, how he would fill me with cum, etc., etc. It was really weird and pretty ick TBH, but I tried to deal with it as I liked him otherwise, at least at the beginning. It was the only thing he would engage with though. Even if I told him stuff I liked, even if he incidentally did do something I liked, and I told him he could do that again, he just wouldn't. Like he would never do that thing again. Even if I asked, just go back to telling me how full of cum he was gonna make me. I told him I was uncomfortable about it a couple times, as it honestly started sounding like he wanted to get me pregnant, even though he swore he didn't want kids. Still did it, and only that. After a while it got even worse, as he would get so excited about it, he would finish virtually instantly. To combat this, he would just stop motionless after like one thrust and lay there with his weight on top of me, forehead pressed against mine, staring at me. I couldn't move, or he'd blow. He couldn't move, or he'd blow. It was so fucking ridiculous I nearly cried the last time I let it happen. I've never in my life had sex so shit, and I realized I couldn't go on like this. There were other issues in the relationship at large, but for real, even if all the better parts of his personality hadn't turned out to be largely for show, I'd have left based on this alone. A couple weeks after, having done my routine between relationship checks before doing anything with anyone else, I found out he had also given me chlamydia. You couldn't make this shit up. I'm about 4 months out, treated and all clear, and have started seeing someone else who is frankly amazing by comparison. Whether it goes somewhere long-term or not, I'm just so happy to be having better sex. Story 10. We stayed in contact, and I really miss him. I know if we got back together, we'd have the same issues. He's seeing someone new, and I really do hope he's happy. Pretty fucked up, because I saw us growing old together. I've dated one guy since, and we were much more sexually compatible, but I wasn't as compatible in all other ways. Really nice guy, but I had to end it. Unrelated, breaking up with someone, because you're just not feeling it is horrible. I had mad anxiety before and during doing it. I didn't want to hurt him, and I feel very lonely again. I'll be okay, and so will he.